to give a shout out to our friends at Beatles Rama, where they stream live Beatles music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's Beatles Rama for all of your Beatles music needs.
It's the Beatles from the beginning to the end. It's their solo careers. It's their humor. It's their incredible music. It's the British invasion. It's their American adversaries. It's an historical musical education. It's the Beatles and a whole lot more. A Beatles fan's paradise. It's BeatlesArama.com. Tune in. You'll love it.
Welcome to Tomorrow Never Knows with me, Bob Wilson, Sir Warren Brown, and author Phil Weathers. Of course, Sir Warren, you all know, is our king of all things art. Today, the Beatles Kingdom goes to the cutting edge with Beatles barber Leslie Cavendish.
Okay.
All right.
How many takes would it take to do the Love You Take? That's the answer. Question.
We have had a real rough time getting him on. We had to ask because he's such a good guy, kid. He just jumped right on and he wanted to talk to you guys. He's an author. He's a stylist. He has many great stories. And I go to him as he's sitting waiting for a trim. Leslie, welcome to our show. It's certainly a thrill. Please tell us about you, your upbringing. What led you to become a hairstylist to the stars, and how did all this greatness happen to you?
Yeah, but this is all sort of going in through doors that should have were always slightly open. Back in England, I wanted to be a soccer player, as they say, a football player, like every kid's dream. That's what I wanted to do. But I also got a bit bored about studying, because sports was really my thing. So I left school at 15, and a really good mate of mine who left 4 months before, still my best friend today, went into ladies hairdressing, which is...
What's his name, can I ask? Can we bring him up? Tell us about
Yes, his name is Lawrence Falk. He started the very first unisex salon in Great Britain, which meant that men couldn't go into the salon and have their hair done next to women. So he actually changed it. But before he changed that situation, he told me to go to a place called Vidal Sassoon, which was really the cutting edge of London hairdressing. At the time, the fashion was backcombing and chignons and a lot of work, a lot of hairdressing. And Vidal started using the geometric look, making women look natural. So he told me to go there. I ended up going there, and actually I couldn't even draw. I could kick a ball, but I couldn't paint. So I took a wooden bowl, which was quite crooked, and I actually took it up to his place in Bond Street, which is the mecca of your wives and girlfriends' jewellery. If you've got the money, you go there. And I managed to get a job at Sassoon's, and it was the first time at 15 seeing celebrities that I used to see on TV, basically in the raw. Basically, they'd come in at 8:30 in the morning. So you had a lot of famous people in, like Mia Farrow would come in, and Princess Radziwill, Jackie Kennedy's sister, and Shirley Bassey. And then eventually you start going into other stylists and helping out. And one of the stylists was a guy called Roger Thompson. And his clientele was pretty varied, but he had a lot of the top models in London. And he had a certain lady called Jane Asher. One of the rules that Vidal taught us was that you always remember that these people, whoever friendly you think you are to them, calling her Jane or Miss Asher or whatever, they're still a client. And we all knew that she was the fiance, or actually she was the girlfriend of Paul McCartney. And you wouldn't sort of say to her, how's Paul today? It's too personal. If anyone was going to speak, you let her speak. And I got to know her pretty well, because her hair was, her hair used to be down to her shoulders. She was a strawberry blonde, very thick hair. And it used to take me, being the assistant, to wash her hair, blow dry it. And when I finally finished, I would call the stylist over. And I would say, Mr. Roger, Miss Asher's ready for you. He would go over, do a little bit at the fringe and play around with the hair. And after it took me 45 minutes to do it, he would show her the back mirror and she would say, thank you, Roger, which was fine because I was the assistant. Move it on about another 3 months, I became a stylist myself. But I've been doing washing and blow drying Jane's hair, so I knew how it worked. And this is where I said, how luck sort of comes into it. She used to come in on a Saturday morning for a comb out. This wasn't an official appointment where you'd have your hair styled. It would just be coming for a comb out. Maybe she's got maybe she was just going out for the day. Maybe she was doing a photographic session. She wanted her hair to look neat. And she used to come in, and the receptionist used to go to Roger and say, "Could you do Miss Ash's hair?" And he couldn't do it. He was so slow as a stylist. He was really slow. So he used to say, "No, I can't do it, but Leslie could do it." So instead of me washing her hair anymore, I got someone else to wash it. I then blow dry it. I then trimmed the fringe. And I did that once. I did it twice. On the third occasion, this we talked about within the month, she came in. Again, Mr. Roger couldn't do it. This time she was getting a bit sort of peeved off. I'll use the word politely. And the receptionist said, "Look, Miss Asher wants her hair done, but Roger again, can't do it. Could you do it?" And so I went through the same scenario. And she came in about 11:30. And it was a particular time that I go to football on Saturday afternoons. But, do Jane's hair, started doing her hair, finished her hair. And then she said to me, "Leslie, what are you doing this afternoon?" And I was going to football. And she turned around and suddenly I said, "Why is that, Jane?" And she said, "Have you got time to cut my boyfriend's hair?" Now, her boyfriend was a certain Paul McCartney.
Who's that? Just kidding.
Yeah, the boyfriend. Who's Paul McCartney? It's always, to me, the boyfriend.
Dan Asher, I know, but this Paul McCartney has me befuddled.
Well, you're going to do your homework sometimes. But
all right.
Anyway, so she turned around and I said, "Yeah, fine, I'll do her hair." I'm thinking, really? She asked, am I going around to cut Paul McCartney's hair? I asked her where she lived. She wrote it down. I also asked her what time. And she said, "What time suits you?" So I said, I pushed my luck. I said 5:30, knowing the football would be finished, but I was going to do it any time. And she said, "Okay, that's fine." I said, "Jane, where do you live?" And she went, 7 Cavendish Avenue. And I said, "Jane, that's my surname." And she just looked at me and said, maybe it was meant. So there you go. But I always say that my dear friend Roger Thompson, who taught me hairdressing, was one of the top stylists. He opened up the salon in New York under Vidal's scene. He was the artistic director. But I always call him the Pete Best of hairdressing.
Well, it's funny you bring up Vidal Sassoon. Now, to us, we've known him. That name is a name that resonates. Everybody knows who he is. At this time, was he so new that it was new to people, or was he well established by this point? Like on a scale of 10 today, his being a 10, we know who Vidal Sassoon was. In those days, did we know who he was? Like,
it's what you say. He was rising the charts very quickly. He was really zooming up the charts. People wanted. It was, you come at the right time. You had Mary Quant, you had women, girls in miniskirts when they were wearing long Dior dresses and Yves Saint Laurent dresses. Suddenly you get Courage from Paris. You got Vidal Sassoon haircut. You got Mary Quant miniskirts, and then you get the Beatles. So the culture was changing. So it all and David Bailey, the photographer. So it was all sort of coming together, and it really was just snowballing off. And everybody wanted their hair cut at Sassoon's. To be a stylist at Sassoon, you had to be special. It was an honor to work there. But knowing the build-up of where it would take you, I didn't think at the time when I was Sassoon's apprentice for a while. I don't know if he ever thought that he would have salons all over the world and he would sell out and everything there. So yeah, he was a rising star, but he was rising quickly, a bit like when the Beatles first came in with Love Me Do. He put right. Sassoon on Love Me Do, and then go into Please Please Me, and then go bang into #1. So that's how Sassoon rose the charts.
I just wanted to ask one more back question because you said something that was very interesting to me at the start. You said men would basically go, I'm paraphrasing you, but men would go to the barber shop and women would go to the hair salon. Now, this was the first time everybody was going to the same place. Was
Yeah.
it looked down upon for a man to go into a woman's hair salon, you know, or salon that's now becoming unisex, as you use the word?
Yeah, no,
How
no.
much of a scandal was this?
No, it wasn't looked upon. It was, as they say in England, not the thing to do. You don't have a man sitting next to you because you don't do it. But you know what? You do it. And it took actually my friend Lawrence to do it. And then, see, what happened was in the early days, I give you a perfect example. The Brad Pitt of the day was a guy called Terry Stamp. Terry Stamp had just won an award for a film he did called Billy Budd. Piercing blue eyes, this handsome guy, exactly like Brad Pitt. And he was going out with Gene Shrimpton, the #1 top model. And he asked me if I would cut. I used to cut his hair upstairs, so I couldn't do his hair downstairs. So would have to get him to come in at 6 o'clock in the evening. You know, he'd come in at 6 o'clock, we'd go upstairs, and while I was there, he said to me, "Can you cut my brother's hair?" And I said, "Yeah." And his brother happened to be Chris Stamp, co-manager of The Who. So that was the first time. And then he said, "Can I send in our drummer boy?" So I said, "Yeah, okay." And Keith Moon turned up. But he was upstairs. Suggested to Vidal at the time. I said, and I never called him Vidal. It was always Mr. Vidal. Respect. Time that men and women could actually have their hair done. I said, although I cut sort of people's hair that's in the salon, I don't expect Paul McCartney. I don't expect Keith Moon or anybody to be sitting next to Mrs. Jones or whatever. But the average guy could sit there and have his hair done the same as women. It's the same type of haircut. You're both cutting geometrically. Why not? I'd already left by the time he did open a salon up in Knightsbridge, which someone else took over. But by this time, I'd already had my own salon and doing what I wanted to do.
Could you tell us about, do you remember the first time a Beatle sat in your chair and how much, like you said, Paul was dating Jane Asher, so that was sort of early on. But after you guys were done with them, how much did their hair sort of change? Would we have noticed? And do you remember that first haircut? Who was it that sat down in your chair? I'm guessing Paul from what you said.
Well, this is where the story slightly changes. What you say there, Phil, is that when I went round to cut Paul's hair, I did Paul's hair at his home. In fact, I did Paul's hair in his bedroom. I also washed Paul's hair in his basin, and I poured water over it with a cup to wash it. So he never actually came into the salon. He didn't come to. I was still at Vidal's at the time, so he never came into Vidal's. That was in September 1966, the very first time I went round there, and it was 2-3 weeks after his final concert at Candlestick Park. So he never came into the salon. I always did his hair at his home.
Was he a good tipper?
You don't talk money. Yeah, of course he was a good tipper. He used to tell he used to play songs for me. That's the best tipper in the world.
Well, now that is something I didn't suspect. Can you tell us a little bit about? That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
What song while you cut your hair? He's finished.
No. Let's get it right.
What do you think?
We're at an English gentleman. Don't forget, English gentlemen give you tea to start with. Would you like a cup of tea, Leslie? Was the very first thing he said to me, and I sat down in his front room with a cup of tea, and I did say to him no sugar, which he obliged. His housekeeper gave it to us. So I'm a Beatle fan, and I'm sitting in Paul McCartney's front room with with a psychedelic piano. I got guitars all over the place, up to my hair in bloody bass guitars. I got acoustic guitars to my left. I've got cassettes on the floor. And I'm just sitting there, and I've got a mad dog running around full of hair. He had more hair than the Beatles.
Did you have to trim the dog?
Martha, my dear. Yeah, why not?
Sheepdogs.
Anyway, after one of the things is, I always said to myself, you know, Leslie, don't ever ask for their autograph. Don't ever even attempt to take their hair. Just have knowing that you cut Paul McCartney's hair. This is the first time, don't forget. I didn't know whether I was going to ever cut it again, and I didn't know if I was ever going to meet any of the Beatles again. But, you know, don't blow it in one fell swoop. Oh, Mr. McCartney, can I please have your autograph and say, Leslie, cut your hair? Or can I have a lock of your hair so I can say, you know, it was none of that.
Did you take some and hide it in your hand and put it in your pocket?
I could have, couldn't I? But I didn't.
Just checking.
No, listen, you can check, yes. Definitely, that didn't happen.
Did anybody offer to buy any hair from you?
Later on, yeah, but I'm just going to say about the song. So, because I didn't talk to him about that, we sat down, and what do I turn around and say to him? You know, they're not really interested. Paul wasn't really interested in football. I thought he would have been a Liverpool supporter or Everton, blue or a red. Liverpool were riding high, and you know, as far as football was concerned, but no, he wasn't that interested. So, what do you say to a great man like Paul McCartney? Have you written anything lately, Paul? Yeah, people like to say, you know. So he was at home, and he sat down at the piano and gave me a quick sort of. He sort of just went, oobla dee, oobla da, life goes on, boy, la 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 la, life goes on. And I had no idea what that was. It's only until you hear later. I thought to myself, that doesn't sound a very Beatles song, but he just sang it. I didn't know whether he was just going la 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 just to keep me happy. It wasn't until later that I heard oobla dee, oobla da was a song, and I remember thinking, God, I remember him playing that to me. So yeah, they were my tips.
Not bad. Now, I heard, now correct me if I'm wrong, at some point, Apple, did they come to finance your own efforts? And am I wrong in that, or was there a story behind that?
Absolutely right. What happened was that I'd left Fidel's because Apple were expanding. So Apple were doing, Apple were going to do Apple Electronics, Apple Films, Apple this, Apple that, and Apple tailoring, Apple clothes. So they opened up, they expanded and opened up a boutique in Baker Street. So, you know, the only unfortunate thing about it is that the people that they got to design the clothes, who were unbelievable, were called the Fool. And their clothes were made of silk. And I'm sure they hired longboats from India to come down the Thames, because every garment cost an absolute fortune and the average public person couldn't afford it. But anyway, that went on for a while, but further, that was in Baker Street, but further down the other side of London, West London, is Chelsea. And Chelsea has always been the place where artists, you know, famous artists would live and paint, you know, paint the river, beautiful place of the world, but it's always been bohemian down there. And there was a boutique down there called Granny Takes a Trip, Hung on You, and a salon called, and a boutique called Dandy Fashions, which was part owned by a guy called John Criddle, and the other, his partner was Tara Brown. And Tara Brown was the man who blew his mind out in a car, which John Lennon wrote about, but he actually did. Blew his mind out in a car 10 minutes from the salon, from the boutique. Anyway, his clients were Brian Jones of the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, you name it, and a certain George Harrison, who became very friendly. And John Criddle used to make George Harrison's clothes. And George had mentioned to Paul, and I suppose the other people, to expand and make another boutique down in Chelsea. And I was summoned to Paul's house, met John Criddle, never met him before. And there was George and there was Paul and I think someone else from the Apple offices. And, you know, as a casual remark, just went, Leslie, we'd like to open up a hair salon for you. Is that okay? I thought, I think it is okay. So that's how it happened. You know, they financed the salon in the boutique in the King's Road, and it was ended up calling Apple Tailoring. So yeah, the answer was yes. And
how long was that business going? How long did that particular aspect of your career last?
There, it lasted about a year, because unfortunately, the Beatles were hemorrhaging money left, right and centre from Apple. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had to fit out the salon. So I went to a place in London called Casa Pupa, which is the first place where you would import Italian tiles. You know, these were the first Italian tiles that were different. And I got a whole load, and the bill, the cost was £2,000. Then, we're talking about 1967. Then it was £2,000. I went to the Apple offices, went to the accounts department, and I just said, I need £2,000 to pay for the tiles. And they said, no problem. And they gave me 2,000. They just paid it. I could have said 4,000. I could have said no one was watching the money. And that was just me being honest. So people were just spending money. So it wasn't until eventually they realized that the money is made out of records, not from boutiques, not from this, not from that, but it needed Alan Klein to come in eventually and say the great words. If you carry on like this, you'll be skint in 6 months. That was the words.
Your answers are fascinating in that it tells us about your, it was interesting enough when you were cutting their hair, but the things you're saying delve into so many other aspects of what was going on, like the finances. It's fascinating. And now my friend Phil, who found you for us, and I'm so glad he brought you in, he's a great talent scout. He's an author, and he's got some questions that he wants to ask you, but you're a fascinating guest. I don't, we have all good guests, but I don't say that tritely. You're one of the most interesting fellows we've had on here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Leslie, of course, the Beatles, looking at their history, the Beatles' hairstyles and their clothes, evolved over the years, from Rubber Soul to Sergeant Pepper to the Rooftop. How much of the hairstyle, the look, would you say was your vision?
Okay, so let me just how that explains. For the moment I met Paul McCartney to the moment I finished cutting Paul McCartney's hair in 1975, the Beatles never ever, not one of them ever said to me, "I want my hair like this, Leslie." Every single one of them said to me, "Do it as you see it." Now, I'm at my age. Paul McCartney's what? So Paul McCartney was about 24, 25 years old. I was 19. I was 20 years old, and I had long hair. My hair was long. I was dressing like they dressed, or but they could dress anything they like. So their hair was left to the way it at the time of the day. Where the change happened was when they what I say, they unplugged their guitars and took off their ties after Candlestick Park, is when I came in. My door opened then. And that's when the Beatles had that beautiful Beatles hair, Beatles for sale, with the beautiful hair, shiny. You put that down to Brian Epstein. Brian Epstein was the man, very chic guy, a really nice guy who I never met. I was supposed to have cut his hair 1 week before he died. He was arranged. But, Brian was the complete master of fashion regarding looking good. And he made sure those Beatles' hair were combed, clean, whatever. Soon as they stopped, they could do what they like. The strangest thing is that on the second occasion, I'd met Paul McCartney. My conversation was with, I haven't seen Jane Asher for a while, and he told me that she was filming, and I said, oh, okay. I said, are you going to go down and watch a film? He said, no, I can't do that because we've just finished touring. People are going to ask about the Beatles, and it takes away from the film. So I'm still doing his hair, and I said, fine. And I also said to her, when she finishes filming, will you have time to go on holiday with her? And he said, no, same problem. We go away. The paparazzi will be after us. So, okay. And just as I was touching his hair, I sort of said to him, oh, what a shame. I said, why don't you go in disguise? And he said, like how? So he answered the question that I sort of said. Now, I could have said, why don't you put a pink hat on? Why don't you do something stupid? But that's the way I was thinking in my head. But when he said to me, like how, how do I think? Why don't I cut all your hair off, Paul? And I looked at him in the mirror and he said, go on then, do it. And I said, you serious? And he said, yeah, do it. So there I did. I cut his hair, and I cut his hair as a skinhead. His hair was so short, but this time as well, that he was unshaven. And he had about maybe a week, or an unshaven moustache for about a week. It wasn't a moustache, it was unshaven, because he didn't have to be Paul McCartney. He didn't have to be a Beatle when he woke up in the morning. He didn't have to have his shoes shined and and his tie with a nice knot and his hair looking all lovely. So I cut his hair, and the next thing I knew, about 5 weeks later, there was a picture of Paul McCartney coming back from Nairobi with Jane Asher and Mal Evans, who have been on a safari holiday. And what is the question that the press ask? Who cut your hair? Who cut, what's happening, baby, And he said, they found out, obviously I cut it. The strangest thing is his haircut, and I've been told this by other journalists. Now, you can put this which way you like, but on the journey back from Kenya, he decided they were going to record Sergeant Pepper, and his hair was really short then. John Lennon's hair was really short, and George's wasn't. But if you look at Lennon's hair with his glasses and his short hair, and McCartney, I from there used to do their hair, and then I watched their hair develop. So I never recut their hair short or cut Paul's hair short. And my Andy Warhol of the Beatles haircuts is Let It Be album. You see the Let It Be album, their hair's unkempt. And I know I did a good job on that hair because my grandmother, bless her, who was in her late 70s at the time, 80s, said to me, I thought you said you cut the Beatles' hair. And I said, well, I do. They said, well, look at that haircut. They all need a bloody haircut. And I said, thanks, Grandma. That's great, because it was, that hair was cut, and that hair was actually a natural way of looking. If you look after that, their hair started growing long. George let his hair go really long, but that look of Let It Be, to me, is my favourite look. It's terrific. So I didn't do the early days, but I watched their hair evolve, and I was just part of that.
That's great. That's a great story. Is it true, Leslie, that you were there for the Magical Mystery Tour filming, the rooftop concert, and some of the sessions at Abbey Road? Can you elaborate on those?
Yes, to all three. So we'll do the Magical Mystery. Okay, so we'll leave the Magical Mystery Tour for a second. So I said to you before, I never wanted to take anything from the Beatles. I just would like to hear any recordings or things that they would play me at home. But the other thing I wanted to do was, Paul, would it ever be possible to watch you record? Expecting a no, because to get into a Beatles recording session would be, it's not even like winning the lottery ticket. You just can't get in. And he said to me, yeah, okay, I'll arrange it. And I arranged it through Mal Evans. Mal Evans knew. I rang up Mal and said, look, Paul said I can go and see a session. He must have thought, oh yeah, they all say that. And he obviously must have checked with Paul. And so I arrived there. Again, I had to keep totally quiet, and I go into the sound booth. It was George Martin, Jeff Emerick was there, and I sat in the corner. And at the big studio at Abbey Road, they had the four little booths. It was a 4-track place, and there you were. You had Ringo on drums, in one corner, and you had John singing there, and Paul was the conductor. Is and is the conductor of the Beatles. He was a Beatle 99.9%. All the rest, I think, if he could have been a Beatle all his life, he would have been a Beatle all his life. I could see how John wanted to branch out, and George and Ringo would have done his little bit, but he probably would have stayed. But Paul conducted, so that was a little bit of a shock to me. I saw Paul, and John come up to the sound engineers and started fiddling around with the knobs. you know, I don't know. I'm just sitting in the corner and I'm thinking, oh, and then it's going, what does that do? And whatever the engineer must have said, well, you know, maybe that's too high. Why don't we have it too high? You know, what does that do? That's too low. You can't do that. Yeah, let's have it low. So that was interesting. You could see in their heads that they were experimenting with not the normal way of doing recording, which amazed me, because I thought that people who record records just go down and record records, and you got the headmaster up there telling him what to do, and that's it, you know. But not with the Beatles, not with Lennon and McCartney there. One of the things I did see, which was a bit of a eye-opener, I saw Paul go over to Ringo and take the drumsticks out of his hand and said, I want it like this. Now, I didn't understand that. I didn't even know that, you know, I mean, I think Lennon's actually been quoted as saying the best drummer in the Beatles was Paul. I think that's been told. But at the time, I didn't know that Paul McCartney could play any other instrument except the bass guitar, to be honest with you. And that was quite a little bit embarrassing, because I saw that and I was asked to leave. I was asked to leave the place because not just me, I think there were two other people in there. We discreetly thought we better get out of here because there's a certain Mr. Ringo that doesn't quite want to let anyone see this. That was interesting. So to go and watch them, but I also had a great time not many people know or knew at the time that the Beatles recorded at a place called Trident Studios, which had a 32 track recording studio sound system there. And the Beatles, you know, they recorded Get Back. It's a tiny little studio, and the Beatles always recorded. They started going at 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and they would record all night. They never went there during the day. Their sessions were nighttime sessions. And I remember going down to Trident and seeing Yoko there with John stroking his hair, which she was the only lady there. This was at a time where I was told or thought that girlfriends weren't allowed to, or let's put it this way, they never sort of took their girlfriends down to the recording session. But good old John had Yoko there, so I think that caused a little bit of a friction. You know, if I only saw them once do that, how many times did she go down there? It's not, you know, she wasn't the cause of the Beatle breakup. She was just there, and you know, John looked very happy. So that was a interesting time to watch them record. So yeah, that's number one ticked off.
That's a great story.
And also, I'll tell you something, just to finish that story off, it was about 12 o'clock at night, and George Harrison, they must have been rehearsing. And I remember when Yoko was John was sitting against the wall and she was stroking his hair. I remember George Harrison came over and said to Paul, do you want a cup of tea, Paul? And he said, yeah, please. And he said to me, Leslie, do you want a cup of tea? And I said, yes, please. And he ended up bringing me down a cup of tea. There you go, again with no sugar. So that was it was nice because they made you feel comfortable. And one of the reasons is that, you know, I could have sold my story, told many, you know, I could have sold their hair. I could have told many journalists where the Beatles are. I could have told them that even story I'm telling you now, that right. You know, that she was stroking his hair. It's well known now that these things happen. But at the time, I could have very easily sold my story there, and I didn't. So you get the trust of being part of the inner circle. So that's why I basically was accepted, and that to me, you keep asking, was he a good tipper? These were the best tips ever. You know, be able to sit there,
yes,
and look at it all and think, God, how nice is this?
Yes. Now, are you in the Magical Mystery tour film? Yes.
What happened was that this was actually 3 weeks after Brian Epstein died suddenly. But Paul had mentioned to me that he was going to go on a coach trip down to south of England, a place in Cornwall, And they had all these other things on the way. They were going to stop, and obviously they, I didn't know anything about the music, but they were going to do a film. They had Ringo with his Aunt Jess, and he just sort of said to me that, would you like to come along and be part of be a passenger, and you can also do a hair, if needed down there. And there were only 43 people. That includes 4 Beatles and the driver. So what we're talking about, 39 people. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I thought, oh, this is another great tip, because can't go and see the Beatles, on stage, but I can be in their company and sit with them the whole time and watch how this develops. And it was first of all, I didn't know it was going to really, how good it would be, or even if it would carry on, because I thought, when your manager dies and the guy that's has brought you into this world phenomenon, on his own, him being passed away a couple of weeks before, why would they want to go ahead? Now, what's the best thing? The show must go on, I suppose. The king's dead, long live the king. So they've moved it on, and we sat down on the coach, and there were, Paul was at the London base because the other 3 lived down in the countryside. So we started off in Baker Street, fun enough, and we drove all the way down to Virginia Water, where the other 3 Beatles were. But you saw that even when the other 3 came aboard, Paul was doing the directing, with the director. The other 3, except for Ringo, because Ringo had the front seat, and he obviously had his own. They had a script basically of him screaming and shouting with his Aunt Jess. But John and George sat next to each other, and I sat most of the time behind John, with his feather tickling my nose some of the time in the top there. But yeah, I was watching. They were quite subdued in a funny way, on the coach journey. Let's put it that way. But when we got out, and what was fascinating was that obviously there was the press were following. People knew that the Beatles were on their way because they had a very subtle coach, with the Magical Mystery Tour in bright psychedelic colours. They could just pass through without anyone knowing. When they stopped, they had hordes of Beatle fans there. But what I found was interesting. Well, these weren't the girls at Shea Stadium or even in London, the Christmas show. They wanted to pull their hair out. They were the girls. They were just, Paul, John. Everyone loved one of the Beatles. I love you, John Paul. I love you, George Ringo. It was all that, and they were very, I say humble. They went over and they gave him free autographs, and they didn't act like prima donnas. And all the time I was with them, or saw them in public at least, they threw off a good image. I've got to say, I'm not just saying that. I could turn around and say, oh, you hear about this years later. Ringo won't give his autograph or said to his fans, and they got upset. And those, that's probably because people are flogging them off on eBay. So maybe that's he didn't want to do that. But at the time, they were giving autographs to everybody, to waiters. It was fascinating to watch them work, play, have a good laugh, and being on a coach for a week with them. It was a tremendous experience. So yeah, I was very lucky. That was as good as it could get, them being the Beatles hairdresser that was on the road with them. This was confined little space, and it was fun.
Those are some wonderful experiences you've shared. I'm going to pass it on to Warren Brown, and he's got a few more questions for you.
All right, thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. And hi, Leslie. Welcome.
Hi, Warren.
Never knows. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Ringo's wife, Maureen, was a hairdresser also. Did your paths ever cross in any way, personally or professionally?
Yeah, they did. Not as you said. She was a very good hairdresser. She always did Ringo's hair. Obviously, when they first met, her being a hairdresser, but as time moved on and Ringo was all over the place, he didn't really need me to cut his hair. I cut it on a couple of occasions. I think he cut his hair. I did do the hair for his film The Magic Christian. I was asked to go down, spent a week down there. That was because part of it was the producer was Dennis O'Dell. And Dennis O'Dell was head of Apple Films at the time, and he asked me if I go down and do Ringo's hair. On another occasion, I may have said no, but you know, the hook for me was he was filming with Raquel Welch, and she was the one that I had on my bedroom wall. So it was a great buzz there to watch Ringo. They had Ringo Starr, Raquel Welch, Peter Sellers, and John Cleese from Monty Python. I mean, Christ, had they easy. Yeah. So Ringo, not so much, but I met Maureen a few times. A really nice lady. We actually talked about hairdressing. Ringo, on the very early days, not knowing that the Beatles were going to still be going after 4 or 5 years, ambition was, so he told, was to save up enough money to open up a chain of hairdresser salons. And I would imagine that Maureen would have been the one in charge.
Right.
So yeah, she nice lady, nice lady.
I can imagine. You were friends with Jay Sebring. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm very interested in this question. From a little boy, I've always kept up with the Manson murders. For some reason, they intrigued me. And Jay Sebring, as you know, was Sharon Tate's hairdresser. Can you tell us a little bit about Jay?
Yeah, this is one of the scariest parts of my life, only because, as you said, the Manson murders came into the equation. I tell you what happened there. I get a phone call, this in about 67, 68, around that period of time. I was doing a lot of Beatle work, and I was also doing hairdressing work. You know, it wasn't just the Beatles I was doing, but I was a hard-working hairdresser. It just happened to have quite some famous music people or whatever, but I had all as well, ordinary people as well. And I get a phone call, and the other end of the telephone is a guy, and he just says to me, "Hi, my name's Jay Sebring," and I didn't even know who he was. I said, "Oh, hi." He said, "Yeah." He said, "We got something in common. I've been giving your number. I do the hair with the Beach Boys and Frank Sinatra and you name it." He was just rolling them off, who he did. And he said, "You do a similar. You do the Bee Gees, you do some of the Who, and you do the Beatles hair." And he said, "What I would like you to do," he said, I'm thinking of opening a sort of, we're going into the business of sort of products and maybe salons, whatever. And I'd really like to meet up with you and get you involved in it. Would you be interested? And I'm also based in LA, right? And I thought, oh, that sounds really good. You know, this, you know, but at the time, and I said, "Jay," I said, "Hi, thank you. That sounds really good. And yes, I'd love to meet up with you and discuss this. But I can't come now, you know, because I'm involved." But I said, "Can we talk in about 6 weeks' time, something? And then I'm sure I could get something organized and we'll have a nice chat." He said, "Not a problem. It's great. Really nice talking to you." And I put the phone down. That was it. I got his number and thought, well, okay. Didn't think really much of it. And also as well, Sharon Tate was a client at Vidal's, and she was a beautiful looking woman, absolutely beautiful. And also Roman Polanski was a friend of Vidal's, and he, in Rosemary's Baby, you see Vidal Sassoon, Mia Farrow says, "Oh yeah, I've just had my hair cut, you know, by Vidal Sassoon," you know, and he did some publicity photographs of Mia Farrow at the salon, which I remember seeing. So that little connection was there. So you've got Sharon Tate, you've got Polanski, and you've got a Jay Sebring, right? No one I really thought I'd ever be involved with. And then I pick up the newspapers, and there it is, the Manson murders there. Killed Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant. Okay, that's the worst thing you can imagine. I'm thinking, oh my God, that is so, I can't believe that. And then someone else, okay, that's terrible. And then her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, hairdresser, Jay Sebring. I went, I felt sick. I went, no, Jay Sebring, this is not the Jay Sebring that called me 6 weeks ago. He got killed? No. Obviously, I checked it out. It was the same guy. I was invited at that time to come and stay with him. If I wasn't busy, and he said to me, he actually said, if you can get on a plane next week, you can come and stay with us. And which was all very sort of nice, maybe I could have easily just said yes, and if I wasn't doing anything. And I went to see the film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood last year, and I'm watching, and I actually did not know. I knew what I was watching because I knew that Brad Pitt and the other guy, Leonardo, were being the stuntman. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's a brilliant film. And I'm watching it, and then they go down to the, to stay at the house, and then you see the Sharon Tate, and I'm going, oh my God. Then he went to Jay Sebring in the film. And then you hear, I think, I'm not even sure if that's how the film ended or whatever. And I actually got a cold sweat come down me because I actually thought, my God, that could have been me. They could have been taken down. I could have been the other one. So that was scary. So talk about being in the right place at the right time. God help me. That was sad. But Jay Sebring, if anyone asked you, it's a bit like someone saying to you, can you name me all the James Bonds? And you would go all the James Bonds, but you wouldn't say George Lazenby, right? Ask someone who killed the Manson murders, he would go Sharon Tate, right? No one knows the hairdresser. It was Jay Sebring. So there you go. Scary, but there you go.
I would say the man upstairs is looking after you, my friend.
I think he did. Thank you, man. Whoever you are, man. Exactly. I thank you.
Yeah, that's a scary part there. And I was very intrigued with that all my life. I was very young when that happened. And I thank you for that answer, and your explanation was off the charts. I appreciate that very much. Sgt. Pepper's found the Beatles with a pretty bold look. Did you do the haircuts that they were wearing at the time? And did you ever trim a mustache?
No, they didn't quite have a moustache like you, Warren. Maybe I would have. Maybe I would have at least said, and let me look at yours. Yeah, you're okay. But a lot of people have the beyond the lip that would need probably trimming there. And that would be great because I could put my fingers there and then cut it like cutting hair. No, I told you, Paul had a shadow of a moustache in the early days. During Sgt. Pepper, yes, they started growing a proper moustache. No, I didn't cut their moustaches. And as I said before, their hair was short and then they started letting it grow. So yeah, I trimmed their hair while it was being Sgt. Pepper, but I didn't cut the hair for Sgt. Pepper because their hair wasn't supposed to be like that for Sgt. Pepper. It was just at the time, that's where the hair was. The only thing was Paul's hair was short because I cut it as a skinhead. So there you go.
Thank you very much. And one thing on Yoko, you met Yoko personally, from what I understand earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about her and what were your thoughts on her?
Okay, so my very first, my very first time I ever met Yoko was a very strange occasion. I used to go up to the Apple offices in Savile Row, and the press officer was a guy called Derek Taylor, who really was. People talk about the fifth Beatle. Derek Taylor is one of the fifth Beatles. There's a few of them along the line, but you can certainly put him up there as a fifth Beatle. You wanted to get through to the Beatles. You wanted to talk to them. You wanted to have a personal friendship with the Beatles. Derek Taylor was the man. And we got on really well. And while I was up at Apple, I was standing next to Derek, and John Lennon came up the stairs. I used to go up there to cut people's hair. So Peter Asher was the A&R guy, so I could be cutting James Taylor's hair without knowing it was James Taylor. His name was just James at the time, or somebody else, Badfinger, or whoever happened to be there, or whoever wanted a haircut. While I was standing there, Lennon came up the stairs. And, he passed Derek on the press floor. If you're facing Derek, on the left would be the boardroom, the offices where John would go to. And he saw me standing there. That sounds like a good name of a song, that. I saw him standing there. Anyway, he said to him, "Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's the guy, that's Leslie. He cuts Paul's hair." He said, "Well, send him in to me. I want my hair cut." It's literally just like that. And He said, he thinks John wants you to go and cut his hair. So I thought, oh, okay, right, go in there. And it was a time where, I thought I'd just go in there and cut John Lennon's hair. Him sitting down on the thing there and have a little chat with him like I did with Paul. I thought it'd be quite normal. I found out nothing was quite normal with John, because he was having an interview at the time. And he had a big, he had a chair, that looked down, an office chair, the desk, and the person that was asking him questions, he was looking down at them. And John's hair was a little bit long at the time, and nothing worse for a hairdresser is when you try to cut someone's hair at the back, they keep moving their head backwards and forwards. So I said, John, could you just 1 second, just let me do this instead of moving? He was oblivion. Right, so there was a couple of things there. He asked, it wasn't, actually this was the second time. The first time I know, because there was a music journalist, they were talking about music. But this is the second time, and I'm expecting the same situation where the lady, where the journalist will be asking John about the Beatles, or him, or whatever, but music related. And all he kept saying was, "I don't understand what you're talking about. Could you please explain to me?" But he was maneuvering with his head. He was moving it backwards and forwards. And that's what I'm saying. I couldn't keep his hair, head still. And I'm thinking to myself, why is he sort of saying to this person, "I don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't sound like a music question to me." And he said, "Can you please, he was animated, "Can you explain to me what you mean?" And, I'm looking there, and all I saw was this very small lady dressed in black, long black hair, Oriental looking. Had no idea, maybe I thought she was a journalist from that part of the world, Oriental journalist. I don't know, why not? They were big out there. But there was not one question about music. It seemed to be more about what she was doing, because he said, "I can't understand what you're talking about." And I was so sort of fascinated by it that I thought, I'm going to hang around here for a bit. And it was quite amazing. What I can't understand, and I was talking about this the other day, why would he want me, number one, why would he want me to have why would he want to have a haircut when he's working behind the chair? Number two is, why would he want me to be there while he's discussing something that he doesn't understand? Normally you would say, "Look, I'm busy at the moment, come back another time, come back another day, that was what the norm, I would think the norm would have been. But no, I was oblivion. He didn't, I'm not even sure he knew I was there. Okay. And I didn't realize till, I left. I'm not even sure if he knew I left. And he was still talking to her. And it was only later on that I realized this lady was Yoko Ono. He went to her art show that she had at the Indica Gallery. And I think from that day on, he never left her. And that was my image of Yoko Ono. That was fascinating. It was a fascinating thing watching somebody saying, "I don't understand what you're talking about, explain to me." I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, I think they were kind of glued at the hip there too.
Yeah, totally.
For a long time. Well, I thank you for that. I'm going to ask one more short question, and I want to hand it to Bob to close out the show. Can you do a little bit of name dropping on the stars that you have done and stuff like that?
Okay, so I used to, cut hair of Barry Gibb, Robin Gibb, the Bee Gees, the original Bee Gees, Colin Patterson, Vince Maloney, when they were, and there's three others. So that when it was a 5-piece band, James Taylor when he was with Apple, and there was the famous Dave Clark 5, who used to do a lot of, used to do Mike Smith's hair, who always reminded me, I think John Lennon said he had one of the best rock and roll voices. Fantastic voice, Mike Smith. Then there was Keith Moon of The Who, and then the film stars, a lady called Susanna Lee, you had who did Paradise Hawaiian Style with Elvis Presley, and then you had Terry Stamp, and my neighbour, my good mate James Hunt, the world Formula One racing driver. So there were many, but there were many secretaries, and there were many normal people that I used to do. So, some of the people I used to know, for instance, there would be a guy that would come in and they were starting a new band, and they said, and I used to say to them, what band are you? He said, oh, we're a band called Yes. I used to say, oh, The Who? Yes. Now, when someone says something like that, you think to yourself, yeah, yes, okay. Let's have a next time it'll be No, or Who, So it was very strange. It's only until these guys sort of get hits that you suddenly think to yourself, God, that was him. Another one who was funny. So yeah, there were a few other people that came in. Sterling Moss. I got into the motor racing crowd. I used to do the hair of all the racing drivers, and so they always wanted me to come and cut their husband's hair. So I was on the starting grid for a few times.
Did you do Mario Andretti?
Never did him, no, the Canadian, but that was James Hunt's one of his best friends, Mario Andretti. There was loads of guys. There was lots of racing drivers. I said to one racing driver, actually, it was really funny. His name was Sir John Whitmore, and he was married to Lady Ganilla Whitmore, who was actually a beauty. And I said, I cut his hair, and as I was cutting his hair, I said to him, I don't recognise him because he wasn't a Formula One driver, but he was a racing driver, I said, oh, have you won any races? You that involved? He said, yeah, I've won Le Mans, a few times, and I've won this. And I went, I've won the Great Britain Rally, and I've won the Monte Carlo. I've won this, I won that. I went, oh my God, So, it's a bit like going back with the pop stars. I'm a groupie at certain times, but there's, there are certain things that, I remember saying to Princess Radziwill once, I was washing her hair, and I didn't know who she was, and I said to her, oh, are you in London for long? She had an American accent, obviously, and so I said, are you in London for long? She said, yeah, I'm here, and I said, oh, lovely. I said, are you here for long? You're going to say, yes, I'm going to Buckingham Palace for lunch. And I went, oh. And I said, yes, my sister has been entertained by the Queen. It was Jackie Kennedy. She's Jackie Kennedy's half sister, right? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, blimey, who are these people? I don't know. So there you go. A few others.
Some awesome stories. You had a great life, it sounds like, mixing with
that. Not bad. Took it in my stride.
All right. I thank you very much, Leslie. I appreciate talking to you. Your stories are off the chain, and I'm going to hand it over to the Bulldog.
Well, you're a fabulous raconteur, and a lot of these stories, and others are in your book. Could you tell us about your book, how it came to be, when you decided to do it, and where it's available to the listeners?
As I said to you before, is anyone there?
Yes, hello? We're here.
Okay, we're here. Sorry. Okay. The reason why I decided to write my book, I've been telling you that I never told all these little stories that I'm telling you about. I kept it quiet for a long time, and I suddenly saw a lot of publicity that Sergeant Pepper's 50 years old, and there's an anniversary. There's always loads of anniversaries of the Beatles. And 50 years later, I thought maybe I'll tell my story, not as a excuse me, as the Beatles hairdresser, but as a journey going through the 60s of the fashion, the music, the clothes, who you met, and all these little stories I'll be telling you about. There's many, many, many more. You know, I really was a Beatle fan, and I didn't think that I would end up cutting. You know, I mean, if you're a hairdresser or you're a barber or men's hairstylist, whichever way you want to call it, you know, whose hair would you really would love to cut and say you've made it? There's only two people. Well, actually, there's only five people. There's the four Beatles, which is fine, or Jesus Christ. Wouldn't it be great if you were Jesus Christ's hairdresser? But that would never happen, especially to a nice Jewish boy like me. So, you know, you get the Beatles. So I decided to write it, and I lived some of the time in Spain, and I kept diaries. I was very lucky because Derek Taylor had all the press cuttings of the Beatles. And I asked him one day, it was like going to see Father Christmas with all these sacks up at the office, and I said to him, how do you get all these things about the Beatles? He said, oh, there's something called Associated Press. And he said, you sign up to them and they send on everything. And I said, oh, can I sign up? And he put my name down, which was actually great. So I started getting press cuttings from all around the world. I got press cuttings whenever my name was mentioned with the Beatles. So I kept a scrapbook. So even when people turn around and say, you couldn't have enjoyed the 60s, because you remember it. I did everything in the 60s, and I remember every single thing. And when I was in doubt, I used to look at my press cuttings and think, did I really fantasize about it? Did that really happen? Did I really do this? Did I really do that? And I've got pictures to back it up, and I've got newspaper articles. And I just started going through this whole thing, and I thought it'd be a nice, rather than just write about the Beatles, what it was like. Half my family live in America, and a lot of my cousins my age, and I can see where Lennon came from. When I was a qualified hairdresser at 18 and a half. People were going into, Americans were kids at my age were going to Vietnam. So, people were coming back in body bags, and I could see how John Lennon saw that, where the audience he was playing to UK and in Sweden and Scandinavia and all over Europe, everyone was enjoying the Beatles. As soon as him go to America, that same audience, a lot of them are coming back in body bags. And I just thought the cultural change, because we had that in England at the time, we had demonstrations, anti-Vietnam, and we got involved in that. And it was all part of this whole culture situation. And I decided to put it all down in the book there. And it was my journey. I hope people enjoy it.
Where can people order the book? Do you have a site on the net or Amazon? Where do we go to get a copy?
Yeah, well, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on my website, www.beatleshairdresser.com. You can get me on Messenger. What I do is on Facebook, people can order the book from me, or I can give them my publishers, which is almabooks.com. But if you wanted to get one, I can always write it personally to the person. I've been doing that for years, actually, because I order the book, and there's people have got with Beatles songs or Beatle events. They met their husband, he proposed to her that day, they made love on that certain songs or whatever. So they like a personal message. So yeah, that's where you can get it from, and it's there. If any Spanish viewers at all, it's published in Spanish, so I get a lot of South American Beatle fans writing to me. And I get a lot of people just ask me questions on my website or on Facebook, which I'm happy to do. So yeah, why not? It was a great time for me. If I could share it, I'll share it.
Well, this was a great time for us listening to you. I know there's so much more in the book that I recommend to everybody listening. Now, are you going to help us carry on a tradition? At the end of the show, we have a little Beatles song, not about great singing, but about fun and a good vibe. So we'd like to close out singing the end. Will you do that with us?
I certainly will.
How about I'll take "And in the End." You can take "The Love You Take." Phil can sing "Is Equal To," and Warren with his classic "The Love You Make." How does that sound? I'll start us off.
That sounds good to me.
All right. And in the end,
the love you take
is equal to
the love you made.
Ba, 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 ba.
All right.
Good show.